Definitely Plant Geek. Me and John Plant Geek all the time.
Yeah, and we're gonna Plant Geek a whole bunch here shortly. So let me go ahead and try and share my screen.
All right.
And
for those of you joining us, if you want to write in the chat box, where you're joining us from: Orlando, Florida, Houston, Texas, California, Canada, Mexico. We got Marty from Seminole. Is that Seminole, Florida, like by Tampa, or Seminole County, like Oviedo? And then if you also want to go ahead and mute yourself, that way there's no disruptions when John is speaking. Okay, Marty from Oviedo, Evelyn from Tallahassee, welcome. Like I said, if you can please mute your microphone if you're not speaking, that would be great.
All right. Well, I think I'll go ahead and get right to it here. Let's just kick it off. We might hit about an hour, and I will go ahead and there's going to be a little bit of a section here that involves doing polls and questions. So I get to quiz you guys a little bit and have a little bit of fun at the end. But so we might hit about an hour. But if I understand if people got to go, just go. And we'll throw it up on our website as well if you miss anything, like for the Master Gardener website anyway, for YouTube. So yeah, I'll just kick right into it here. My background is more with trees, and so I'm going to be a little more biased there in terms of that's what I understand how to identify well. I can get around all the other stuff, the little herbaceous plants and that type of thing, but I think Tia has been more on that side with the flowers and paying attention to those things. But if you've got the basic concepts of terminology, you can get your way around all of this pretty easily. So I'll go ahead and see. You need to be able to think about plants based on what they are taxonomically somewhat. And by taxon, I mean by where they fit in relation to each other. And then I guess they're related to that. Taxonomy is often related to morphology. Not always, but you have to be able to think about the shape of the plant and the structure of the plant. So the big breakdown that I was just mentioning was woody plants versus herbaceous plants. And then your woody plants, you've got your trees, shrubs, vines, cycads, palms, and some ferns. And on the herbaceous side, you've got all your non-vascular plants, plants that don't even have a system for being able to transport water within themselves. These are the most primitive, earliest plants, basically. We don't see them too much, but like mosses, for example, true mosses they don't have a vascular system. Ferns, broadleaf herbs, and I guess that would include forbs as well, and then graminoids. And graminoids are all your plants that are grass-like. So grasses, sedges, rushes. It can get pretty technical when trying to differentiate those, but these are all things you need to think about. And of course, there's always exceptions here. There are some ferns that happen to be woody plants, but most of them are not. You have fern trees, basically. And you have some vines that happen to be more like a forb because they are seasonal and they're not hard and woody, for example, cucumbers and other cucurbids. So there's a lot of overlap here, but overall, it helps to think of plants in this way, woody versus herbaceous. And then I guess the plant parts, in the beginning, it might be kind of hard to pick out these different parts, but it really helps to think about whether it's branches or stems, things that are used for structure, foliage, the leaves and all the associated parts with the leaves, what's going on below ground, roots, rhizomes, tubers, uh, the reproductive parts of the plants. This can be often the most telling uh, if you're able to locate a flower or a fruit. And then defense structures, so thorns, spines, prickles. And then I guess related to all this is the buds. The buds are basically the stem cells of the plant. And like in particular for woody plants, if like they go dormant a lot of the time, so that might be all that you have. So they're they're very crucial in terms of identification in some instances. So let's just like I mentioned, like for botanists, folks that do this for a living, the flower is often the most important part of the plant for identifying it. And um, it has the most tell, but you got to know what you're looking at. I mean, for example, you can see all three of these up here, and they all look like a solitary individual flower. And if you look here below, there's different patterns for how we call them inflorescences because they might be a floret, a tiny flower, basically. And but on here, you can see the different flowering patterns, inflorescence patterns that we can have. And if you can determine what type of flowering pattern is going on, that can be very crucial. Like that is generally one of the best ways to go about it. And then from there, you can look at the flower in all sorts of other ways. Is it symmetric? Is it bilaterally symmetric down the middle? Is it symmetric radially? All different ways. Those are all pretty important cues. So if you look up top, I think most people would probably look at these just off of what you see and say, this looks like a solitary flower. But actually what's going on here is one of these is different than the others. So you can see here, these two are these are the true solitary flowers. But this one, even though we think of that as being an individual flower, it's actually inside of it. There are lots and lots of little flowers inside here. So just something to keep in mind. Things don't always appear as they seem on the surface, like with these in terms of plant ID initially. And just here's some examples of what all of these look like. You know, orchids, they tend to make raceme. Spikes, you've seen those a lot of times with trees and palms, grasses, corim. This is, I think, a clerodendrum. Umbels, I think carrots. But I mean, there's all sorts of things that will have these different patterns, but these are just some of the more obvious example. Capitulum, which we just saw with the this chrysanthem, I think. And you can get the sunflower. And so if you zoom in on the sunflower here, you can see all these little florets on it. And a panicle. So I think this is a red chestnut or a red buckeye. And then the cyme, I think this is Heliotrophis or something like that. This is a pretty uncommon one. So, so if you can, all these flowers will develop into different types of fruit eventually. And I just want to point out that there are many, many types of fruit. This isn't even the full true list. But if you can familiarize yourself with like what type of fruit and the fruit is visible, that can help out big time in terms of narrowing down what you're looking at. However, we live in Florida. Leaves are present most of the year for most trees. And so that's really going to be the focus here for what I'm going to try and talk to you all about today. If you see here, like the parts of the leaf, leaves always connect directly to a stem or a branch. And as you can see, like that, this is where the true connection occurs, is right there. And then you can break it down into the base of it, the apex, and the margin. The margin's basically the border of the leaf. There's usually a primary vein and secondary veins running down it as well. And the little attachment to the stem is called the petiole. So as you can see here, this is a pretty good demonstration of all of the different types of leaves that are out there. And as you can see that there's lots and lots of shapes, and they all have specific terminology related to the shape, and like it's oftentimes based off of in Latin. So I don't think too many of you probably figured we were going to have a Latin class today, but we're going to have a little bit of a Latin class. And I guess outside of the different shapes that you can see here, you've got margins as well. So, and like all these are related to like other terms that come from Latin as well. Like lobate means lobed. So we can kind of make sense of these a lot of the times. And cilia is with hair. So ciliate, like it's like the edges, the margins are hair-like. Entire is, that's kind of obvious. Entire just means that it's rounded. So, and another thing to keep in mind is the venation. And basically, you can see that there's different patterns within the veins, and that can be really helpful as well, seeing those patterns. So just to kind of show you how the Latin will work a lot of the times, if you can use this to your advantage when trying to familiarize yourself and potentially keying out or making sense of what you're looking at. You've got these trifoliate plants. Tri means 3. So this leaf, it means that there's 3 leaflets associated with it. This whole thing is a leaf, but trifoliate means with 3 foliages. So three leaflets. So acuminate, tapering to a long point. Acu is a Latin phrase, and it means sharp or narrow. So this it tapers to a sharp point. Lanceolate, pointed at both ends, but also lance. So it looks like a lance. A lance has a lanceolate shape. So these kind of look like the end of a spearhead. Falcate. So falcate, if you look at this, it's kind of turned. And if you know what a falcata is, it's actually a sword, a curved sword from ancient Rome. And then sickles also in Latin, but they actually, and it shares a common name with falcons because their wings are sickle shaped. So that's why you can also look at this wing, this leaf, and see that it looks kind of like a wing, and then you can interpret that as falcate because it looks like a falcon wing. Spatulate. So I think this one is kind of obvious. Looks like a spatula. Dentate. So this one should be a little bit obvious too. Dental. And then if you think about it, like pasta that's al dente is hard pasta because you have to chew it with your teeth a little bit. Palmate should be kind of obvious. Reniform. This one's a little bit more complex if you know your anatomy, but it looks like a kidney. Deltoid. So this one's going to be related to the Greek alphabet. And it looks like a delta, a triangle. So on the final one here, I'm showing you guys is chordate. It's another body part. It's the heart. So a heart-shaped leaf is a chordate leaf. So the other big thing, I mean, that's a lot of terminology. There's a lot more that I didn't even cover right there. But if you can familiarize with that stuff, particularly if you want to just go out and identify leaves based on leaves, like having that chart with you that I just showed you is very, very helpful. So I'll be including the PDF from here for anybody that is afterwards, for anybody that wants to refer back to it. But the other big thing that I want to point out here is the arrangement of leaves and how they're situated on a plant or on a twig or a branch or a stem. So you can see that we've got here is that this twig, this little branch, it has alternating leaves on it. And then on this other plant right here, the leaves are positioned opposite to one another. So most things tend to be alternate, but if you look at here, you do have quite a few plants that show up as opposite as well. So and then and then you have whorled as well, and whorled is probably the most rare of all. So whorled is where multiple leaves will come out of one point. So outside of these arrangements, you can have just one leaf popping out, like in all of these examples, but you can also have leaflets. So when you're looking here, this is one, plant that has one leaf. It's unifoliate, but and those were basically were we call this the where the connection is to the branch, the petiole, you can have the two leaflets. So neither one of these is a leaf. This whole thing together is a leaf. And from there, it can get even more complex. Like you can have three of them, as we pointed out earlier, trifoliate, palmately compound. So yeah, these are all technically, besides this one right here, these are all compound leaves. It's like plants that have more than one leaflet, like attached to, and like this little thing here that's called a rachis. So anyway, from there, you can have an even number and have it be even pinnate. As you can see, here's a couple different examples of even pinnate with different numbers of leaflets. And you can also have odd pinnate, where you have a leaflet that's at the very end, leading to an odd number of leaflets. And then you can get even more advanced potentially. And you can have basically this whole rachis right here is what we would call this. You would have something called a rachilla, where it's basically a subrachis, and you get even more leaflets on those. So that is even less common, things that are, and we call that bipinnate. You can even go further and have tripinnate and quadpinnate. So it can become pretty crazy sometimes, but that not many things do that. If you can find something that does that, you should be able to narrow your list down very quickly in terms of what the plan is that you're looking at. So just continuing from that chart that I showed you earlier. So here's the bases: chordate, heart-shaped, auriculate, which means ear-shaped, sagittate, cuneate, which comes to a narrow base end, truncate, which means if you think of like something that's truncated, it's cut off. Basically, it looks like it ends prematurely. Asymmetrical. Certain leaves will have this, kind of like those falcate leaves that we were looking at earlier. And then the apices, mucronate means it has a tiny little tip. Acuminate means that there's a fair tip. Attenuate is a very long tip. Rounded, it's a little obvious. And the emarginate is where it kind of comes back in on itself. And you can have a truncated end too, where it basically ends prematurely. It's cut off. So here's just another example of leaf vasculature. This can be very helpful. Not many things will have like this arcuate type venation. Most things tend to be, most plants you look at tend to be more in line with pinnate, like oaks and things like that. But palmate as well for maples, for sycamores, that type of thing. Parallel is what you'll see with like orchids, palms, etc. And reticulate, you tend to see that more with a lot of the herbaceous plants. So, as I mentioned, we're spoiled here in Florida. We've got the leaves that are present all year, but sometimes when you don't have the leaves present, you have to go off of other visual cues. And fortunately, bark tends to be something that stands out, and you can kind of break different trees into different categories based on the surface texture that they have. So you can see here, this is just a small sample, but like here's some of the terminology. Smooth, lenticels. Lenticels are basically like little protrusions that show up on certain plants. Rosaceae typically have them, for example. So your apples, cherries, etc., they will have these. Furrows, so ridges, if they are developed even further, cracks, scales, and strips. And then if from there, you can also, you're very reliant up north on your buds. You have to get a little closer, and you somehow have to take a look with a hand lens or something and try and look at like how these look. I mean, as you can see, some of these have certain patterns to them as well. Like this one right here, you can tell it's opposite. So all ash trees are opposite. So that can be kind of helpful in some instances. So in some other things to just keep in mind, always shape of no matter what part of the plant, the color, smell, and texture. So, and based on all those things, and particularly with if you want to use a dichotomous key for leaves, this is how you can identify something if you're looking at it and you can't tell what it is. A lot of books that are out there have dichotomous keys that regard, plant identification books. They'll have these keys in them that help you figure out what you're looking at. And so that big breakdown that I showed you between simple leaves and compound leaves, that's usually like the first step for these, because that's a very big breakdown. Then from there you can say, okay, if it's compound, maybe if it's got these serrated leaves, or like you can really, that's it. There's only one plant in your area that might have that feature. Unfortunately, though, it can get very complex, especially for plants with more similar features. So, I mean, a plant that is simple with simple leaves, you got to look at whether it has how many apices are on it, what the margin's like, what the entire plant looks like on the edges of its leaves, the overall shape and size of the leaf. And and then from there you can kind of break it down. So if you want to go try this out on trees here. And this is where if it was non-COVID, I would have some plants here ready for you, and we could key these all out like together. This is worth checking out. It's a key on how to do plant like common trees it says for Tampa Bay, but it also works for Central Florida in general. It'll work here in Orlando. And here's the glossary that it comes with. So if you don't understand the terms immediately, you can at least like kind of look at this, refer to this glossary and figure out what they're talking about when you're looking at the key. So let's just say, for example, that we're at the very first step here. Leaves and buds are opposite, or leaves and buds are alternate. So you have two different directions to go here. You've got alternate or opposite. So let's just go with alternate for now. Leaves are simple, or leaves are, then it will take you to this step. If it's alternate, you'll go to step 3. Leaves are simple, or leaves are compound. And from there, let's say the leaf that let's just say, for example, that this one is the one that we're looking at right now. So the leaves are simple. We go to step 4. This is the compound leaf. This is the simple leaf. And as you know, like something to point out here, look at the bud. There's a bud right here. So that helps. When you can see where the buds are at, like on the branches, that can be really helpful determining whether you're looking at a small branch or a leaflet or a leaf. This whole thing's a leaf, and you can see that like that bud is what is determining that is on a branch. This whole thing is the leaf. Okay, so we went to now we're going to step 4. Leaves are entire, or the leaves are serrated or lobed. Well, here's your serrated and lobed margins versus your entire margin. So let's see what we got next. So we're going to go with, I think we're going to go with entire. So we're going, then it says go to step 5. And now it's saying, look at the leaf undersides. The leaf undersides appear silvery or white and are highly aromatic when crushed. So this is where all of your senses can be incorporated, not just your visual cues. Or the leaf undersides are not silvery and white. So I guess we're going to 6 here. Oh, so this is if you were to see 5, this is what you would go to. This is the camphor tree, so it would smell, and I would have this here present for you all too if we were in person. So let's just say the leaf undersides are not silvery or white, where that would lead us to. Leaves are leathery and revolute. So revolute means kind of like boat-like, kind of like folding a little bit. Or leaves are not leathery and relatively flat. And then basically the last 2 trees that you can get there are either the live oak, which is revolute, or the laurel oak, which is much more flat leaves. Yeah, here's another example. So just continuing with this theme here, these are 2 trees that we have very commonly in Central Florida, but they're easily confused for one another. But if you can look at a couple of simple features on them, they're usually pretty easy to differentiate from one another. So let's just start with the bark here, comparing the laurel oak and the live oak, like what I just showed you. On the left-hand side, you can see that this tree has kind of flat, smooth bark, and it's dark gray to blackish, and it's not very furrowed. You can see on the right-hand side here, this is the live oak. Compared to the laurel oak, the bark of the live oak is darker. It's deeply divided into narrow furrows. It becomes blockier with age. So keep this all in mind. I usually actually try to think of this. It kind of looks more like elephant skin. I think that's what it reminds me of a lot of the time. So here are the leaves. The leaf on the right is the laurel oak. It's light green underneath. And on the right, the leaf of the live oak is it's somewhat pubescent. Pubescent means, it's going back to our Latin, it means a little bit hairy. And underneath of it, it's gray, white, kind of gray, green, white. It's definitely paler than what you would see on the laurel oak on the left-hand side. And here's a comparison of the acorns. So still continuing here, the acorn on the left-hand side, this is the laurel oak. They're nearly round. We would call this globose, kind of like a globe. like, and you can also see it's covered by this cap, and that they're typically paired together or in short stalks. And then live oaks are produced irregularly. They are about 1/3 covered by the cap typically, and they're usually in little clusters. But you can see that they're longer as well. So with that, I'm going to kick it off into having a poll here. So I want everybody, there's going to be 10 questions on here, and we're going to cover a lot of the stuff that I went over. And I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds for each question. So we'll go ahead and I'll launch the poll.
All right, looks good. I can see it.
You got it coming up? Okay. So which is which? So A is the live oak and B is the laurel oak, or B, A is the laurel oak and B is the live oak? And we'll review these. We'll go through all 10 questions and then we'll review them. Okay, next question. Same deal, but based off of what we just showed you, try and identify.
John, on my end, it still shows the first poll.
Really? Or no, it's the same poll. There's multiple questions on the poll though.
Uh-huh. It doesn't seem like anybody answered, and Marty's saying in the chat, the poll's not working.
Some people, it doesn't work, especially if they're using phones. It just doesn't work, and you're just going to have to write it down and go with it. And it's not going to give us an answer until everybody goes through all 9 questions that I've got here. So just roll with it. It's not going to be perfect, but just try and answer, there's 9 questions. Just try and keep that with respect to one another here. And I also wrote the questions up here and the answers here. So just if you don't see the poll visible, just go ahead and write it down and follow along.
All right, Chris says it's working for them.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the next one. Yeah, somebody submitted already. Please don't submit yet.
Oh, don't submit yet.
Yeah, we've only got,
right?
Yeah. We've got 9 questions. And I'll give you 30 seconds each for each question.
So this one is the acorns, which is a laurel oak and which is a live oak.
Yeah. Okay, next one. What is the arrangement of this leaf?
Looks like a Brazilian pepper leaf. Oh, it is.
We'll talk about it more, Tia. Okay. Another leaf arrangement.
Ooh, getting complicated on us.
Well, I want people to feel like they're being challenged at home, you know?
Good.
So okay.
Virginia creeper. You guys got to learn how to identify this one, you Floridians. That one's easy. Everybody should get that.
I hope so. The polls will tell us the truth, though. Okay.
Poison ivy. Well, that's good. You put those two on so they can learn the difference.
Yeah. Trying to be kind of practical here. All right.
Plumeria leaf.
Another good one for Florida. Oh, I'll keep it here for a little bit longer. Okay. And so phyllotaxy it's the combination of the arrangement and basically like how this leaf is broken down, like whether it's compound or simple, that type of thing. So is it whether it's opposite, like we pointed out, or alternate, or if it's compound or simple. It's just a fancy way of putting both of those things together. And then go ahead and submit once you're done here. Okay, I've got 12 of 22 showing up here. 13 of 22.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and continue, and we'll go over the results.
You going to tell us the answers?
I sure am.
Okay.
Okay. So it was A. A on the right-hand side, or in the left-hand side is the live oak, and B is the laurel oak. And we got 11 out of the 13 respondents went ahead and they had the right answer. So that was pretty good.
Good job, guys.
And yeah, this time it was B. The A hand side is the laurel oak and the B is the live oak. And as you can see, well, and I think we had a similar thing here, like 92% or 12 out of 13 got this one right.
Wow.
And so that's pretty good. I hope you guys were paying attention to the features here. The underside was pretty green for the laurel oak, and the live oak, it's kind of white. And if you also are paying attention, you can kind of see the margins are that revolute. There is a little bit more texture. It's a little more cupped looking. So, and these guys tend to be flatter with the laurel oaks. Okay. 10 out of 13 got this one, an A. And as you can see that the acorns on the live oak, they're a little more linear, they're longer, and they cover about a third of the acorn. These live oak or the laurel oaks, the acorns are much more globular, much more round shaped. So those were the big things we pointed out earlier. And let's see, 4. We got, this one was a little more split. We got, let's see here. Most people pick C. So 6 out of 13 pick C, oddly bipinnately compound. So you're close because there's an odd number of leaflets, but if it were bipinnately compound, you would have like that subrachis. Basically, you would have leaflets coming off the middle of these leaves right here, if that were the case. So if you were one of the 2 people that got it right, good job. Pat yourself on the back. So, my ordering was off here. That's not good, but the next one was this guy.
The coffee tree, Kentucky coffee tree.
Yeah. So it is the Kentucky coffee tree. I think for this one, oddly pinnately compound was still the most common one, but this is technically evenly pinnately compound. You can see that there's an even number of leaflets here. So that was, if there was another one coming out in the middle at the end, that was what would make it oddly.
Yeah, you got to look at the tip, the very tip. If there's 1, it's odd. If there's 2, it's even.
Yeah. So, but it is bipinnately compound because, you've got basically that rachilla on the rachis. So it's just basically a mini rachis and then like even more smaller leafules or whatever they call those, because this whole thing is a leaflet. And then these are leafules or something along those lines. Most people got this one. Good job. Palmately compound. And
Yep,
then
looks like a
Virginia
palm.
creeper, like Tia said, everybody should, this is one you need to know in Florida. It's pretty common. And it's a vine. And it's most often confused for this guy, which was trifoliately compound, which everybody got. Very good job, everyone. So I'm glad we got the concept of 3 down, at least for the leaflets. And number 9. Yeah, there's 10. Sorry guys, I used a bad version of this. I think I had another version that I updated, so that got jumbled up in my multiple copies, but I'll make sure to fix it for next time. Anyway, this one, almost everybody got this one, a simple leaf, just 1 leaf coming out here. This isn't the rachis. This is the rachis right here, and that's an entire leaf. And our last one, 8 out of 13 got it. It's opposite and simple. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see the little buds right here. If you can find where the buds are at, that can be really helpful. Instead of this whole thing being a leaf, you can tell that the leaf is actually this thing because it's attached to where the bud's at. That isn't always the case. Those buds can be sometimes concentrated in places away from the leaf, but when you can find it like this, it's really super helpful. And this is actually wild olive. You know that one, Tia? I think it's called osmanthus.
Yeah.
So that's another one you'll find out in wet areas here. So just I just wanted to like show you guys again. This is, if you can take home anything today, this is 101. The most basic thing for identifying the plants is how are the leaves arranged, alternate, opposite, or whorled? And then from there, are they compound or simple? And then if it's compound, it can be all different messes of compound. And then for this is simple, you'll look at the pattern of the veins. So you get another palmate leaf here. So I think this is a sycamore. But anyway, if you can get this concept in, this is 90% of the battle. And then the rest of it is, it's just going to take time. So other things to pay attention to when you're out trying to do your identification, where are you in the environment? Are you in a wet area? Are you in a dry area? Are you in somebody's backyard? All those are relevant to a lot of the time to figuring out like what you're looking at. The more natural areas are going to have very different plants than places like in your backyard, typically, unless you live out like in Bithlo or something. Things to pay attention to is the form, the structure, the overall, what does the plant look like? And then, because you'll start seeing those patterns, like live oaks typically grow as large trees. They can be little scrubby things, but typically it's a tree. So that is something that you kind of have to pick up with time, is like thinking about the different forms and relating them. And then after a while, you'll start building up like a database in your head of what you've seen and what things look like. Sometimes you'll see something that's really off, but a lot of times trees have a specific biology. Well, plants have a specific biology to grow a certain way. And then something else is, are there any odd features that really stand out? If you can find the fruit or the flower, big, really big. Unfortunately, they're not there a lot of times, and that's why I focused on the leaves. Here in Florida, we're really spoiled. The leaves are almost always there, and that's what I focused on. But then from there, is there any weird texture? I mean, is there anything that really just looks a feature that you just normally don't see? Like, for example, are the margins hairy or ciliate? Like, that's really weird. You don't see that very often. That automatically, if you could find that feature, you can go through your book and try and see if anything keys out with that specific feature. Colors. Anything besides green is typically something that like is going to be noted and help you. Like if you can find any part of that plant that is a different color than green, it'll probably help. And then aromatic. You want to be careful with this one, because if you're crushing up poison ivy, it can be pretty bad for you. But if you feel confident that it's not something that's going to be harmful, crushing up the leaves and seeing if they have a particular smell can be very big. So, and then keep track of shapes. Like, I mean, it's a lot of mental cues with shapes and like relating to what you've seen previously, but it'll come with time. So that's kind of what I'm just trying to convey here. How do you become good at it? You got to go out there and go do it. You got to go out and practice. Unfortunately, this is a great time to do it because you can social distance the whole time. You don't have to be around people. You can just be around plants. This is a great time to look into plant identification. And just kind of following up on like what I was mentioning here. These are my keys for learning how to identify plants. Familiarize yourself with the terminology. It can be tough, but like I mentioned, any of these books or any resources that you use, there ought to be glossaries that will break it down. And the more you look at it and the more you do it, the easier it'll come. And then from there, if you can start learning the specific key features, big one today, like the phyllotaxy, is the leaves alternate or opposite? Are they compound or simple? That's a huge one. And then there's other key features that are out there too. I mean, for example, some things have flowers a lot of the time, that type of thing. That can be helpful. And if you can especially start figuring out what the common plants are, and you feel comfortable with those, you can automatically cut those ones off your list a lot of the time when you're going out to identify, and you're finding something that's a little bit unusual. And then, yeah, the third thing is practice. It's really weird, but like sometimes if you spend a whole day like looking at these plants, you'll close your eyes at the end of the day and you will just see plants in your head. At least that happens to me. It's really weird. Like, and you'll see like the patterns, the shape, like in, I know this isn't for everybody, but yeah, it's just trying to break those shapes and patterns down. And your brain, it's a computer. Its job is to like run these things through its own algorithms and to make sense of what it's seen before. And the more that you familiarize yourself with it, the more things will fit into place to one another. So good books will help you along your way. These are just a few I wanted to point out here. If you want to learn more about, you want to learn simultaneously about morphology, the different parts of the plants, but also how the plants are related to each other. This one gets a lot into taxonomy. Really good book. Relatively cheap because it's spiral bound, has lots and lots of photos. This one is completely, so this one, Plant Identification and Terminology, Harris and Harris. This one is completely, it's like an entire glossary. So, but it has pictures in it. It's also very good if you're just trying, if you need something to refer to, particularly like if you're going off the key of something else. Sometimes you've only got the key available, and it might not have a really good glossary attached to it. This thing will help you a lot. And I just flip through this thing from time to time, and every time I look in it, I learn something new. And then the other thing, if you want to be specific to Florida, this is like the Bible for Florida and identifying plants here. It's the Guide to Vascular Plants of Florida. Has an excellent key. You can get almost anything that's of decent size. You might have some very odd specific plants like that are you only find in localized endemic areas, but that aren't in there. But overall, it does a really great job for 90-95% of what's out there in Florida. And then if you either want to focus on trees or wildflowers, both of these are good. This one was actually put out by my old boss, Andrew Kozer. Has tons and tons of photos. It's made to be handled out in out in the field. Like it's easy to flip through. It has lots of photos. It breaks it down really well based on like how those leaves are structured, like we've been going over. The other one here is Florida wildflowers. This is getting more into a lot of the times like the systems that are in Florida. This is more of an ecology type approach, but this will help you a lot in terms of thinking about plants that way. And yeah, I helped teach a dendrology class, and we still recommended that everybody get this book. Dendrology is just trees, but this is helpful for everything else, even though it just says wildflowers. So with that, I guess that concludes today's talk. Man, we're right on time too. But yeah, we've got time for a few questions here. If anybody wants to go ahead and throw them our way.
Yeah, John, there was 2 questions. The first question was from Marty Anderson, and they want to know what is the advantage and disadvantage of more or less leaves from an evolutionary standpoint.
Well, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but I think that there might be something to do there with probably leaf. If you think about leaf shape, the smaller the leaves, the more leaflets that there are, the more wind can move through them. I think there's got to be that. And then you also have to think about as well what their function is, which is to take in light. And I think that that's probably the 2 biggest things is like that some of them that having individual leaves versus a lot more leaflets, like there can be different advantages for taking up light, and then also like how they're able to dissipate um, wind or any other forces. So I think that's probably what's going on there mostly, but I can't tell you for sure. Like I haven't had to get into that aspect of it. I just know how they're broken down and how to identify the plant, but I I will have to look into that further. Do you have any idea, Tia?
Um, no, not really. I mean, plants are kind of evolved for all kinds of different reasons all over the world. So I don't think there's a general answer for that. And then there's another question. Buds and nodes, are they the same?
Usually, like usually at most nodes, there's a bud, and that's a terminal node, terminal bud. Um, I think that there might be some weird instances where you have nodes where there's not a bud, but generally speaking, there's going to be a bud associated with each of those nodes, unless like the bud's broken. So in a lot of cases, like the bud, it will have only been there when the plant's dormant or something like that.
Yeah, or if you're trying to make a plant cutting and you take, the leaves off and try to root it.
Mm, yeah.
Someone was asking, is this going to be recorded? Do you know the website that you'll post it on?
Yeah, I will put it on the Master Gardener website for our YouTube videos. So I'll go ahead when this is all over. I'll go ahead and throw it up on our YouTube, and I will share with everyone the PDF and the YouTube link. I'll have Shalise, our office assistant, help us out with that one, and she'll send that to you all.
Okay, great. There's no further questions.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Tia, for coming on board and helping me out here as well. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thank you for being here on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning into Friday afternoon. And I hope you all learned a lot. And now that you've got a little break here coming up with Thanksgiving, you guys can go out and try and do some of your own plant identification. But take care. Have a good weekend, everybody.